And a touchdown for the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Yeah, Rick here from Tiger Stock Network, and we're going to be taking a look into... We are going to be doing our Fantasy League episode for Week 2. So we're going to be taking a look at notes to know about Week 2, 4 storylines to watch, top plays in the fantasy at each position for Week 2, starts and sits, and then also 6 sleepers for Week 2. And then we'll go over all of the fantasy numbers, salaries, whatnot. So let's see here. So this is for the notes to know. Eugene Lewis's current streak of 9 games with a touchdown reception is tied with John Millington for the second longest in CFL history. Terry Everson established the record of 10 games in 67-68. Davis Alexander at 5-0 so far has set the record for the best start as an Alouette. While Levi Mitchell was the last quarterback to set the start for his career at 5-0. At BMO Field, Toronto is 27-7 under Ryan Dinwiddie, including 16-2 the past 2 seasons. Calgary is the only team against which he has a record below 500 at 3-4. Mike O'Shea's next victory will be his 108th, tying him with the CFL Hall of Famer, the late Dave Ritchie, for 7th all-time. And then dating back to last season, Trevor Harris won his past 6 starts. His career is 9-5 against the Ticats. So we are going to... it says here... Run, Brady, run. Oliveira is a reigning MOP and MOC. He has 17 career 100-plus rushing games. His next game will tie him with Norm Wong for 3rd amongst Canadians, behind John Cornish, 22, and Andrew Harris, 29. Oliveira is aiming for his 4th consecutive 1,000-yard season. The last Canadian to was Wong in 55-58. Joffrey Reynolds was the last player to reach the milestone as part of a 6-year streak from 05 to 10. Over the last 3 years, he's averaged 5.5 yards per carry. Last season, he was the only player to average 100 yards from scrimmage per game. Quick slants, league-wide. Home team swept Week 1 for the second time since 2006, 2022. So that's probably second time. Was in 2022, and first time was in 06. Each team that rushed more yards emerged victorious. Last week, 37% of rushing and receiving yards were gained by Canadians. And then milestone games is Eugene Lewis's 100th game this week. For the Thursday game, the BC at Winnipeg, Winnipeg's home opener, BC's second game of the season. Following his first win as head coach, Buck Pierce returns to Winnipeg, where he spent 10 seasons, winning 2 Grey Cups, 19 and 21, making 5 Grey Cup appearances, 19 and then 21 to 24. Nathan Rourke has yet to defeat Winnipeg. He is 0-3, 53.4% rate, 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and 63.6 rating. The rest of the CFL, 13-5, 7.6% completion rate, 32 touchdowns, 19 interceptions, and 109.7 QB rating. So he must have a hard time playing either Winnipeg or in Winnipeg. Last week Stanley Berryhill recorded his first 100th plus, or 100 plus yard game. Mike O'Shea's victory, I've already mentioned that, is 108th, tying Dave Ritchie. Chris Strevler, 5-8, will make his first start against BC. Nick Dembski needs 109 yards to surpass Darvin Adams, 4,607, to join the top 10 in Bombers history. Okay, so Montreal 1-0 against Ottawa 0-1. The Alouettes have won the team's last 8 matchups in the last 10 at Place Stadium. At 5-0, okay, that one I've already read. Last week, the Alouettes went 6-2-1 on the road, while Ottawa established its best record at home, going 7-1-1. Or that was last year, sorry. Last week, the second overall pick, Keelan White, had 4 catches for 41 yards. Eugene Lewis, we already know about his touchdown streak, and Matt Schultz will make his 14th CFL start, 6-7. We have Calgary 1-0 against Toronto 0-1. Last week, Calgary recorded 150 rushing yards, led by Dedrick Mills, league leading 94 and 3 touchdowns. Dave Dickinson is 12-3 versus Toronto. Vernon Adams is a career 2-5 against Toronto, but he has 14 touchdown passes in the matchup. Markel Lee registered 10 defensive tackles in his first CFL game. Clark Barnes recorded his first 100-yard game last week against Hamilton. Toronto hasn't started the season 0-2 since 2019. Argonauts rushed for 34 yards last week, the team's lowest on the ground since 2023, a span of 50 games. Winton McManus recorded 9 defensive tackles last week, and first-time player Calvin Turner Jr. returned 142 kick yards. Saskatchewan is 1-0 at Hamilton 0-1. Rough Riders are looking to start 2-0 in back-to-back seasons under head coach Corey Mace. Last week, Saskatchewan registered a league-leading 4 sacks, including 2 from Malik Carney, while allowing none. Dating back to last season, Trevor Harris had won his past 6 starts. His career is 9-5 against Hamilton. Last week, Montreal native Samuel Amelis recorded 8 catches for 133 yards to sit tied with the league lead. It was the 5th 100 plus yard game in his career. While Levi Mitchell is looking for his 100th victory as a starter, he is a career 12-6 against the Rough Riders. Dating back to last season, he is averaging 346 passing yards in his past 6 games. So the storylines to watch in week 2 is going to be can Nathan Rourke beat the Bombers on Thursday night? Friday, with Drew Brown injured and out, can Matt Schultz move them in the right direction and get them the win. Toronto and Calgary game. Can Toronto stop the run? And then for the Saskatchewan at Hamilton, it's the trench battle. It's well documented that games have won or lost in the trenches. That's the storyline that they're looking at. Saskatchewan has got to the quarterback 4 times in week 2. Malik Carney had a pair, Jameer Thurman and Bald on Ado. Each had 1 apiece. Hamilton's offensive line didn't allow a sack on Bo Levi Mitchell last week when he played Calgary. Keeping Bo clean will be essential for him to have time to find his receivers downfield against Riders' pass defense that allowed a league high 413 yards through the air last week. Who wins the battle for week 2? So now we are gonna go to top plays at in fantasy for each position for week 2. Sorry. So we're gonna start at quarterback first. Trevor Harris, Saskatchewan, 13,000, projected 18.2. Trevor Harris attempted more than 26 passes this week. If he continues to average 10.4 per pass, this ranking will be justified against a Ticats defense that allowed nearly 11 yards per pass in week. Nathan Warwick, 14,000. 18 fantasy points per or projected fantasy points. The top ranked in week 1 according to EFF. Nathan Rourke looked a lot like a dual threat terror like he was in 2022, but it's just 1 game. But you love to watch the potential he provides. Number 3, Bo Levi Mitchell, Hamilton, 14,100. Projected 18.1. Don't count on Bo Levi Mitchell delivering another average of 6.1 yards per pass against a Rough Riders defense. He lit up for a combined 675 yards and 5 majors in 2 games last season. Hopefully Vernon Adams can avoid the interception bug that damped otherwise solid debut with the Stampeders. Despite the miscues, Vernon Adams earned the 8th highest grade amongst all players in week 1, according to PFF. For running backs, Brady Oliveira, 15,000. Knows that Claris means a lot more of Brady Oliveira. That can never be a bad thing. Brady Oliveira rushed for 242 yards in 3 games against last season, while adding 8 receptions for 66 yards. Translation: Oliveira finishes with over 100 yards scrimmage. Cedric Mills, Calgary, 10,800, average or projected 14.9. Dedrick Mills generated 67 of his 69 rushing yards after contact in week 1. The trend will continue against Toronto's run defense that allowed 6.3 per carry to Montreal. Number 3 is James Butler, 11,300, projected 15.5. He looked like the James Butler that shined in Vancouver from 21 to 22, finishing with 18 fantasy points in the win over the Elks. No one will fault you if your week 2 lineup anchored by Butler. Greg Bell, Hamilton 8,000, 14 projected points. Not the best opening week for Greg Bell, who managed 10.6 fantasy points. Facing the Saskatchewan defense will present a challenge, but Bell's the type of back who can rack up fantasy points just on a couple of touches. Number 5. John Thomas Erlington. Montreal 8.5k. Projected points 10. John Thomas Erlington may not be flashy, but he's going to get a high volume of trenches, balance off Alouettes offense. Receivers lead number 1 is Tyson Philpott, 11,000, projected 16.2 fantasy points. Though he caught 4 passes for 48 yards in 124.4 depth yards per his 8 targets, excites us about Tyson Philpott having a monster week 2. Number 2, Justin Hardy, Ottawa, 12,500 for the salary, 15.5 for projected fantasy points. Justin Hardy caught 8 of his 10 targets from Drew Brown. Quickly is establishing their shared rapport. He's primed for a 100 catch, 1,500 yard season, so don't hesitate to benefit. Number 3, Samuel Emilus, Saskatchewan, 11,100. 15.5 fantasy points. Samuel Emilus continued to show off his talents in week 1 by catching all 8 passes thrown his direction. He is an underrated star who's set to change that this season. Number 4, Kenny Lawler, 10,500. Projection 15.7 fantasy points. Kenny Lawler was targeted week 1 high 13 times and will continue to receive plenty of attention from Bo. The 4.462 catch rate percentage will increase. Justin McInnes, BC, 13.5, and also has a projected 15.5 fantasy points. His receiving major helped Justin McInnes finish week 1 with 15.5, despite catching 5 passes for 45 yards. Expect the Lions to be more aggressive by getting him involved early in the contest rather than one target he had in the first half of the win over the Elks. And then Eugene Lewis, 11.7, salary, 13 fantasy points. Late head coach Buddy Ryan said of Pro Football Hall of Fame receiver Chris Carter, all he does is score a touchdown. Keep that pleasant thought in mind when adding Eugene Lewis, who's scored majors in 9 straight games. Tim White, number 7, Hamilton, 11,000, 14.6 fantasy points. Here's the hoping Ticats stretch out Tim White more this week after averaging just 7.6 yards per route. Levi Mitchell completed just 1 of 6 attempts of more than 20 yards. While that's not his strong suit, getting White in favorable matchup is deep is a must. Number 8, Calgary, Reggie Begelton, 10.6, 12.3 fantasy points projected. Reggie Begelton and Vernon Adams will just be fine. Expect better fantasy numbers than his 10.8 outing in the opener. Braylon Addison, Ottawa, 9.4, 15.2 projected fantasy points. There's plenty of targets to go around in Ottawa for Braylon Addison to be the 3rd receiver ranked here. Nick Dembski, Winnipeg, 10,200 for salary, 12.6. We're not expecting big numbers from the Bombers passing game without Matt Claris. However, if there is a receiver you need, as always, Nick Dembski is your guy. Number 11, Stanley Berry III, 8,000 BC, 11.6 projected fantasy points. Stanley Berryhill's 28.5 fantasy points in week 1 was no one-time fling. He's a top 12 fantasy receiver with considerable upside. At number 12 for the receivers, Keyshawn Johnson, 7,500, 12.5 projected fantasy points. As a solid as usual, Keyshawn Johnson will top his 12.5 performance in week 1. We're betting he finds the end zone for one time as well in 2025. Defenses. Saskatchewan, number 1, 8.9 salary, 7.2 fantasy points. Riders recorded 4 sacks in week 1 and will keep Bo Levi Mitchell uncomfortable Saturday evening. Montreal. Alouettes are a team comfortable on scoring a defensive major weekly. Winnipeg. They'll knock off the rust early while seeking to knock the steam out of BC offense that rolled up a week 1 446 total yards. And then BC 9,006 defensive fantasy points. The way that Lions defense harassed Trey Ford in the 4th quarter in week 1 might be secure to how dominant Matthew Betts and company can be. Now we're going to go into the starts and sits, 4 plays, and who to avoid in week 2. With BC at Winnipeg, they're saying to start Berryhill the 3rd, wide receiver, Lions 8,000. And they're saying to sit Winnipeg receivers because with no Zach Claris serving his suspension, means the passing game won't have any zip. The Montreal-Ottawa game, they're saying to start Eugene Lewis because he's scored 9 times in 9 straight games. So they're saying that they're betting on him getting a touchdown against the Alouettes defense. And they're saying to sit William Stanback. A 4th quarter touchdown helped William Stanback finish with 16.4 fantasy points. Yet he tallied only 26 yards on 9 carries. Catching the ball 4 passes for 38 yards was some comfort those who had Stanback in your lineup, as he quickly displayed his value in the passing game. So, for the Calgary at Toronto, they're saying start Dedrick Mills because he will. He's already surpassed his touchdown production from 2024, rushing for 3 touchdowns last week and had 94 rushing yards, and also 3 receptions for 30 yards. Toronto also allowed a league high 163 rushing yards to the Alouettes last week. So they're saying that if all goes to plan, Dedrick Mills should have another great week versus Toronto this week. And they're saying to sit Dante McMahon, who generated a mere 36 points. And he only had 4 carries for 19 yards. As the Argos only ran the ball 10 times in week 1. While Arbuckle led the ground attack with 17 yards on 3 carries. So they're saying this week do not use the Argos run game. They're saying for the Saskatchewan at Hamilton, to start Samuel Amulis. Let's here. Without running back, AJ Ouellette being limited participant in practice, Rough Riders could instead empathize the pass. The team did sign Curry. Either way, Amulis will continue being the go-to option for Trevor Harris, and that bodies well for Saskatchewan fans and fantasy users when you consider the Ticats yield 10.1 yards per pass. Count on another of a stellar production from MLS. And they're saying that to sit Bridges because with all of the receivers in Hamilton, they both had 7 targets. Him and Brandon Larry Orange had 7 targets. Larry Orange only caught 5 for 55. Smith had 3 for 26 yards. So they're saying don't expect Ticats to throw 50 times in week 2. But do keep in mind that the target distribution will be limited if Tim White and Kenny Lawler can grab Mitchell's attention at high volume. So that's starts and sits. And then we have the fantasy sleepers for your lineup for week. Quarterback Davis Alexander. We continue endorsing the Alice Pivot, who scored 15 fantasy points in the opening win over the Argonauts. Davis Alexander was efficient, completing 19 of 26 passes for 205 yards and a major while rushing for 50 yards on 4 carries. Sean Thomas Erlington, we envisioned Stevie Scott the third to be the Alouettes featured back, but Montreal turned to the veteran Sean Thomas Erlington, who responded with 86 rushing yards on 17 carries, including a pair of runs over better of 10 yards. Erlington finished with 8.6 fantasy points as he shared touches with Travis S, who produced 4.2 fantasy. First receiver is David Unger III. He delivered 82 points on 4 receptions in week 1, finishing with 12.2 fantasy points. Targeted 7 times. He is obviously has a rapport with Nick Arbuckle, who should continue as long as Nick Arbuckle is the top of the depth. Second wide receiver is Keelan White, Ottawa 6,500. The third overall pick in the 2025 draft asserted himself into the flow of targets from Drew Brown, catching all 4 targets for 41 yards in the loss to the Rough Riders. White faces the challenge of getting a steady stream of opportunities playing with the likes of Justin Hardy, Eugene Lewis, Pimpleton, and Addison. But that will all change as Matt Schultz is starting this. Dante Myers, Saskatchewan 5,000. Dante Myers had quite an opener, catching 3 passes for 28 yards and 5 targets. In the win over Ottawa, we're liking him to deliver a strong rebound against Ticats' pass defense that allowed 10 yards in 1. AJ Ouellette suffered an injury in week 1 and could miss time, which in turn would lead to more pass attempts by Trevor Harris. In that case, there might be more opportunity to take advantage of that and watch him produce numbers that will graduate him from this week's class of sleep. Clark Barnes, 6,200 at Toronto Saturday. Week 1 might have been a springboard of a breakout season. Clark Barnes, who caught all 4 targets for 112 yards. Barnes, 106 depth yards. We're the third best in the opening week, topped by only by the 212 yards of Kenny Lawler and 203 yards of Tyson Philpott. Oh, third best in opening week. Okay, gotcha. I just misread that. Stampeders need a reliable deep threat, and Barnes appears to be capable of overseeing the role. He scored 50.2 fantasy points, and will remain in the range this week. So that is all of the fantasy news and notes for week 2. Let's take a look at our fantasy. We did not do. I'm not showing my roster. We did not do that well in week 1. We only had 84.2 last week. As Gittins and Oletz both left the game injured. So we're hoping that we can bounce back this week. So I already have my lineup on paper. I did have it, but I didn't want anyone to see my lineup. So hopefully, we can have a bounce back week this week. And before I forget, I need to do. Okay. I need to enter my pickup. Old Dutch pick'ems. Play now. Thurman says good night. We'll say Berglund. I'm gonna go Calgary. So am I going with all away team? Alright. There's my pick'ems. Your board. Little march. I got 2 total points. So hopefully we can bounce back. But I do appreciate everyone for stopping by checking out week 2's fantasy news and notes. I do appreciate everyone for stopping by. This is Rick from Tycat Talk Network, and have yourself a great rest.